From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have for you on the program. Awesome potential. Donald Trump dangles economic rewards before Kim Jong-un as Europe watches from the sidelines. Backing down, a public outcry leads French retailer Decathlon to cancel plans to sell running hijabs. It's temporary. Are permanent jobs under threat in Europe? New numbers highlight a troubling trend. Strings attached. Europe could agree to extend the Brexit deadline, but with conditions. And May's shout-out. The UK Prime Minister mimics a TV meerkat's catchphrase. Well, it is time to meet our panelists this evening. We have Darren McCaffrey, our political editor here at Euronews. Darren, which of these stories are you watching?
Well, Tessa, we often look at populism on this programme, and we've got European Union elections later on this year. And we talk about lots of the reasons and the causes for what we think populism is on the rise in Europe, whether that be migration or other issues, but very rarely actually unemployment. And insecurity about jobs is one of the main concerns that people have about their futures. And it is interesting, this report today suggesting that in some countries, that insecurity around temporary jobs remains very high.
Exactly. All right, joining us as well tonight is Claire Moody. She's a British MEP who sits with the Socialists and Democrats group. What about you, Claire?
Well, a number of these stories. I have Vice Chair of the Security and Defence Committee, so the issue around nuclear non-proliferation is a big one. But actually, this point about employment is a really, really important issue, and it's one that I've been arguing for a long time, that we need to be taking much more seriously at a European level.
Right. OK, and also joining us tonight is Michael Detjen. He is a German MEP who sits with the Socialists and Democrats group as well. Michael, what about you?
I'm watching the situation about North Korea and the development with Trump and Kim Jong-un. Actually, what's going to happen? I was in North Korea 4 months ago, and I can take a look what's happening in North Korea, really.
Absolutely. I think all eyes are on Vietnam today. That's exactly where we are beginning tonight. We've seen that the American president greeting the leader of North Korea like an old friend before, but the images continue to be strangely compelling. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un met for the second time today, and this time in Hanoi in Vietnam. Now, the success of this summit won't be judged just by body language, but through the prism of denuclearization. And whether promises made at their last meeting can be matched with something more substantial. President Trump had a few words for reporters when they met. Let's take a listen.
I think that your country has tremendous economic potential, unbelievable, unlimited. And I think that you will have a tremendous future with your country, a great leader. And I look forward to watching it happen and helping it to happen. And we will help it to happen.
All right, talking there about opening up North Korea on this point. Do you think Donald Trump, Claire, has a point in this?
I am concerned about the lack of measurement, the lack of outcome of this, of the work that Trump is doing. I obviously am in favour of denuclearization, and I am in favour of good, strong deals that ensure that we move towards denuclearization. But if you can compare and contrast with what Trump did with the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, and how much damage he has done by pulling out of that, to this kind of cozying up relationship with Kim, but without any apparent measurable changes.
So if denuclearization is on the table, you are OK with Donald Trump working with someone like Kim Jong-un?
With the goal of denuclearization, yes, but it has to deliver outcomes. This can't just be, we're going to kind of reward you for sitting at the table with Donald Trump. There's got to be a measured outcome. I
think, Michael, many of us talk about North Korea. We've never been there. It's very difficult. You have been there. You've seen what it's like there, at least what they show you it's like there. Sure. So, knowing what you know, do you think it is wise to be working with North Korea? And tell us a bit about what it was like over there.
I think it's necessary to keep in contact also with this communistic system. But I fear that there is a lack of possibilities for the denuclearization. I think it's necessary that they started to denuclearize the country. It's very important to do some steps forward. It's not only dismantling these weapons, it's necessary to let everybody look what's going on in North Korea. They have to show us what weapons they have.
So is denuclearization more important than human rights concerns, for example?
No, it's a part of human rights to have a world without nuclear weapons, I think. That's not a question of human rights. I think it's necessary to give them some humanitarian help. That's okay. And that we see some projects from the EU where we spend some humanitarian help. It's necessary to help the poor people. The rich people or the elite is not suffering. The poor people are suffering in North Korea.
Okay, I want to bring the discussion bigger. Darren, we were talking about the other day on the show as well about sharing the platform with El-Sisi, with Europe's sharing the platform with we would call, leaders with questionable human rights records or who are under fire. How do you choose who you work with? We don't work with Venezuela, but we work with North Korea, but we work with...
No, of course,
Sisi,
and the United States in this instance is choosing to work in what it feels is his own self-interest, because North Korea potentially could become a very direct threat to the United States. And there will always be an ongoing argument about whether people should deal with authoritarian regimes. We're in a real politics world, and that is necessary, I think, from time to time. The interesting thing is, what has Donald Trump done? I mean, he has, in a sense, de-escalated tensions, having, it must be said, first of all, raised them a couple of years ago when he talked about Rocket Man and fire and fury for Kim Jong-un. We're at a time when actually a strike, for example, or an attack on South Korea seems very unlikely, because at least there is dialogue, though there is legitimacy, and we don't know whether that legitimacy is going to provide outcomes. My concern is that Donald Trump is so flippant and is so incoherent in his foreign policy. I mean, leaders go from being his best friends to suddenly his enemies. I mean, look at his relationship with President Xi of China. I mean, it swings back and forth like a pendulum. And my fear with the relationship with Kim Jong-un is that while at the moment it's great and they seem to be kind of friends, that could very quickly change with very serious consequences.
In terms of the EU's policy, though, there is a policy of critical engagement with North Korea. Should the EU be reaching out more? Very quickly, Claire, reaching out more to North Korea and be more engaged with this, because now the EU's on the sidelines.
I actually genuinely would say at this point our role is exactly the role that you were talking about in terms of reaching out to the people of North Korea.
The people, okay.
And dealing with the very real poverty, the very real suffering that is going on with those people of North Korea. And I think that is the best use of our resources and efforts in that, in North Korea.
On that note, we'd like to shine light on that, because there's so much media fanfare around the summit itself. But is the West turning a blind eye on the issue of human rights inside North Korea? And what are people there being told? Alex Morgan in theCUBE has this side of the story. Alex.
Well, hearing you talking there about the people of North Korea, look at this tweet from Amnesty International. They say, the people of North Korea endure enforced disappearances, arbitrary detention, forced labour, no press freedom, severe restrictions. They go on to say, Trump is turning his back on this for a photo op. Now, the people of North Korea perhaps being not at the centre when we're looking at photos like that. It gives the press what they're after, a photo op, doesn't it? But what about those people themselves, and what are they hearing? Well, this, perhaps interestingly here, has been front-page news in North Korea. In the past, the last summit, was not broadcast quite as quickly as this. There was a delay, but this time, Kim Jong-un has been all over the news, his visit all over the state newspaper and, indeed, the state television channel. Now, these clips interesting because they feature North Koreans. Of course, this is a state-run propaganda channel. This is not a free channel. People cannot give their free opinion. But it does feature North Koreans giving their take on Kim's trip. Let's start with this man here who, in this clip, he says, I heard at work yesterday our leader was on the way to a distant foreign country. So even though it's my day off, I am on my way to work to please our leader. That's what he had to say. They then went on in this news report on Korea Central Television to feature this woman on a bus. She said to the camera, I couldn't stop myself from being excited when I saw our respected leader on TV. She said, we can't live a moment away from our leader. I really miss him. That is what the North Koreans are being told. But when it comes to that issue of human rights, there's a really interesting point here. Donald Trump, at the same time he is going hard on Nicolas Maduro on the question of human rights, seems to be sidestepping it with Kim Jong-un. That is not lost on commentators like Michael Tracy here, saying, which journalist is going to ask Donald Trump why he's sidestepping this with Kim and yet going so hard on the issue of Venezuela? That is an interesting point, but it's not just America that's coming under pressure, Tessa, in all of this. I've just got a statement here, literally just sent to me here in the Cube from the UN Director of Human Rights Watch. This is what he had to say about the EU's position. EU nations should restore some sanity, he says, to the conversation by putting North Korea's human rights violations back on the table. It doesn't have to be either or with nuclear weapons and ending abuses. In fact, previously writing on a Euronews op-ed, the UN Human Rights Director for Human Rights Watch here had called for Europe to step up to fill the gap that America seemingly left on the international stage to raise this issue. So the question, Tessa, will Europe do it?
All right, thank you for that, Alex, and our team in the Cube. Michael, I'd like to ask you if you actually saw a glimpse of the real feelings of North Korea when you were there.
Yeah. What the people are feeling is, I think, the question of human rights is necessary to ask what's happening inside North Korea. The people have no free press.
Did you see any of that, or were you shown?
No, I just see some newspapers,
sure.
But not one newspaper I really see. I watched television, and it was only a demonstration of the army. They were singing songs. There was no information inside this television program. For sure, no information about another countries. It's just they watch just their army, yeah? And that's no kind of information.
I want to push Claire on one point, because you were nodding when Alex was saying that these two are not mutually exclusive, talking about denuclearization and human rights. But at the same time, in the real world, actually, it is difficult to do that. So is denuclearization more important than human rights in this instance? Because Trump is choosing to work with Kim rather than Maduro, for example.
I'd actually go back to the example of the Iran nuclear deal, because within that we had a deal that was very specific around denuclearization in Iran and the weapons program and that side of things. But that was absolutely
but North Korea is a different.
But it was explicitly that we had that relationship built between sanctions, but that separate from that are the conversations we have with Iran on human rights and the serious ongoing human rights issues in Iran. And so it is a similar way that you could approach this in the North Korea situation. But again, that delivered outcomes. We're not seeing those outcomes in North Korea on either.
If you can say it in 10 seconds, they'll be direct.
Yeah, it was just, first of all, I don't think there's many Europeans who feel that they can't spend an awful lot of time away from Donald Tusk or Jean-Claude Juncker or like that. It must be said that human rights abuses towards North Koreans are not confined to North Korea. There are North Koreans working on this continent illegally who have been sent out of the country to work for dodgy firms, and actually it's a problem in Europe as much as it is in North Korea.
There's a good point to raise there. All right. Now, there is no shortage of pomp and ceremony at that summit, and a lot of issues obviously coming out of that. But one extravaganza in particular, it seems to have caught the attention of Dutch customs officials. Let's take a look. Private planes, super yachts, expensive cigarettes. This North Korean leader's extravagant lifestyle isn't much of a secret. But today, Kim Jong-un's liking for luxury has been causing a bit of a stir in the Netherlands. That's after Dutch custom officials confiscated 3,000 boxes of Russian vodka believed to be en route to Pyongyang. A total of 90,000 bottles were seized, which investigation suggests were destined for the leader and his army chiefs. But with luxury items few and far between at home, this sneak peek into Mr. Kim's high life could be a difficult one to swallow. go, the life of an authoritarian leader.
But at every summit, he seems to be getting bigger. So clearly, he's been able to get food from someone.
Oh, clearly, somewhere. Someone's sending it to him.
They're also
Very
driving
much
luxury cars, yeah.
Well, there you go. All right, moving on to our next topic for tonight, because it's her deal, no deal, or a delay. That was British Prime Minister Theresa May's offer to the House of Commons on Brexit. Well, she's still convinced that she can get her deal through Parliament, today urging MPs to, quote, do their duty and back her deal. Rather surprisingly, Jeremy Corbyn decided to ignore Brexit at today's Prime Minister's questions. But sadly for Theresa May, that did not make the issue go away. Let's join our correspondent Vincent McAviney in London. All right, Vincent, the Prime Minister, she's calling on MPs to do their duty. Do you think they're going to do what she's asking them to do?
Good evening, Tessa. Well, Theresa May's strategy over the next 2 weeks is to browbeat, to whip, to try and force all those ERG, hardcore Brexiteer MPs within her party into believing that if they want Brexit, then the only way to guarantee it is to vote through her deal. Otherwise, the Prime Minister has opened up to the possibility, of course, of a delay. And the Brexiteers' fear is that it could go on and on and on. So I think over the next 2 weeks, we're used to Theresa May parroting out the same lines over and over again. She is simply going to be saying, vote for my deal. It's the only way to guarantee Brexit, which we all stood on the last manifesto. Now, whether or not she can bring the DUP into that without any changes to the backstop is the real question. But here's what the SNP leader here in Westminster, Ian Blackford, had to say about the Prime Minister.
100,000 jobs in Scotland are under threat from a no-deal Brexit. The Scottish Government's top economic advisor has warned that this could create a recession worse than the 2008 financial crisis. The Prime Minister must rule out no deal right here, right now. Why is she still blackmailing the people of this country?
The right honourable gentleman might not be surprised if I point out to him that there are only two ways for ensuring that no deal is taken off the table. And it's no good members of the SNP shaking their head or muttering from a sedentary position. They need to face up to the facts. We will not revoke Article 50 because we're leaving the European Union. So the only way to take no deal off the table is to vote for the deal.
Now, before the Prime Minister Theresa May made that screeching handbrake turn yesterday and announced the vote on a possible delay to Brexit if her own withdrawal agreement doesn't get through, it looked like tonight was going to be quite a big night because there's a series of votes on amendments. Now, it is still important, though, because the first vote that will be had is on Labour's Brexit plans. Jeremy Corbyn will be putting up his alternate plan for Brexit, a 5-point plan which would see a customs union, close alignment with the single market. Now, of course, he doesn't have the votes to get that through. It will fail in the House of Commons, but then that means that the party's official position will shift to supporting a second or people's referendum. So that will be a change for the Labour Party. Then there will be a series of votes trying to basically make sure that the Prime Minister's feet are held to the fire, that what she said yesterday about having a vote on no deal in March and a vote of an extension, there will be votes tonight to make sure that the Prime Minister and the government agrees that that will happen. Then as well, there will be a vote on the rights of EU members living here in the UK in case of any eventuality. A government very junior minister who put that down, that is Alberto Costa, he has actually lost his job because he put that down and it was embarrassing for the government. One thing to note, though, that they won't be voting on tonight. John Bercow didn't select an amendment from the independent group, this new group of MPs. Anna Soubry, the former Conservative MP, had put down an amendment calling for a new second referendum on Brexit. That has been rejected by the Speaker, John Bercow. It's within his power to do that. So really what we're going to see tonight is MPs taking little by little more control of the Brexit process away from the Prime Minister, Theresa May, as she tries desperately to get her party on side, because there are many of them who are deeply unhappy at the fact that she changed tack. She had said for months it's my deal or no deal, but she is pivoting away under pressure from senior ministers away from any chance of no deal occurring.
All right, thank you for that, our correspondent Vincent McAvaney. And joining me now in the studio to discuss this is Joe Leinen. He's a German MEP sitting with the Socialists and Democrats group. We also have Charles Tannock. He is a British MEP sitting with the European Conservatives and Reformists group. And we have our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, still with us. All right, I will start with you, Charles. Theresa May talking about doing one's duty. Just very quickly, does this feel like if you don't, it almost sounds like you're unpatriotic if you don't?
Well, I mean, you know, I can't obviously quibble with the views of the Prime Minister in what she considers to be her duty. My duty is to look after the UK economy. I wasn't elected on any Brexit manifesto, and I happen to believe that Brexit, particularly the hard Brexit, which she has chosen in her political declaration, out of the single market and the customs union, and a no-deal Brexit, which will be even worse, is very damaging to the British economy. It will not deliver frictionless trade, and the government's own research has suggested a 9% hit on the British economy if there is no deal. And the sort of Brexit sort of, you know, shambles just trundles on. She keeps on kicking the can down the road. Now we're going to have the meaningful vote on the 12th of March, only a couple of weeks before Brexit is scheduled for. Clearly, you know, it could end up in tears.
Everyone is talking about that shift that Theresa May took. Do you, Joe, trust that Theresa May will deliver on whatever promise she makes?
No, she is stuck and lost control over the Brexit procedure. I think it's no more in her hands. It's in the hands of the Parliament. But what is happening there is still a stalemate. You don't know what is coming out. And we really run the risk that at the end there is no majority for nothing. So that we get really a no-deal Brexit. And that is a catastrophe for everybody.
Including the EU 27, of course.
Yeah, and I'd like to bring in... OK.
Yeah,
sorry.
I mean, all I would say, though, I mean, how much is this kicking the can down the road? I mean, the EU's playing along with it.
Yeah, well...
Well, they're fed up, let's be honest. I mean, they are fed up.
They are playing along with this timetable, which is essentially leaving it until the next EU Council meeting to come up with proposals. And they will come up with something, but they are part of this process of leaving things to the last
But they're
minute.
not going to unstitch the legal text of the written declaration and produce some kind of time-limited backstop. That's clear. It's been made clear to the British government for months now. That was all finished in December.
I think what is very clear that we have principles of the EU and the common market especially. So the common market needs
just
a
on
border.
the point, yeah.
And in London, the Brexiters have not made an effort to understand the common market.
Let me bring up the point that you're raising on the principles of the EU. I want to quote what Philip Lambert said because you know, we were talking about the idea of the UK coming back into the EU now, a request for an extension, that is. So Philip Lambert said, MEP, he said that a British request for an extension means it must be accompanied by a credible plan for holding a people's vote on the final deal that includes an option to remain. I mean, do you think that, you know, those are the strings attached?
There are two kinds of extensions, a short one for 2 or 3 months, which would be granted up until the end of June 30th, basically, before the new parliament takes its place. That will be granted for almost any reason to tidy up, to manage the no deal. A longer one, which is what I think he means, clearly is much more problematic.
Even our point in the parliament was that extension makes only sense if you have any new element in it. It's either new elections or a new
That's what he was calling for a people's vote.
One.
Exactly.
So you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, it must be said that Emmanuel Macron this afternoon has said we will only support an extension request if it was justified by a new choice of the British. We would in no way accept an extension without a clear objective.
Is that meddling in the UK's affairs?
Well, it's not, in the sense that the European Union will only accept an extension if it's got the unanimous support of every leader. Clearly, Emmanuel Macron
if the stalemate continues, the 2 months will not help.
He has a
we have then a cliff-edge decision 2 months later.
Yeah, but can I go back to my point? I think a short-term extension doesn't require anything other than a request. A longer-term one for, say, 21 months for the so-called transitional period, that would require European elections, which is very problematic for Mrs May. She's ruled that out. She's implacably opposed to having a proxy referendum, which is what it would become, and the EU citizens would have a vote in this particular
But already the extension beyond the 23rd of May is problematic because you don't know whether there could be a next extension and then we have elections without the Brexit. And you run the risk that the Court of Justice is just abolishing the
So you are perfectly happy that the European Union will put these conditions on the UK?
Of course,
in order to request
we
for that
need
extension.
a clear message from London what an extension means. Does it mean the same as usual, or do we have a new element in it?
No, but they have a problem. They have a lot of legislation which needs to be tidied up, because if she now kicks it so far and so close to the exit date, there isn't enough parliamentary time left to do all the domestic
There will have to be a technical extension. It must be said that what the European Union does not want is another even 9 months, but possibly 2 years of uncertainty, of just Brexit consuming, as we saw in Sharm el-Sheikh, every single EU meeting. And if they are going to accept that, it will have to be on the premise of something significant, which is, I would have thought,
something would have changed,
Jeremy Corbyn's customs union or a second referendum.
Or a general election.
More time has only sense if you have a new element that could
well, there
be
you go. There is,
we all agree.
Indeed, on this point, there is no disagreement. All right, coming up on Raw Politics, a warning from Brussels. The European Commission takes aim at some European countries over temporary jobs. Plus, a French sportswear company bows to public pressure, cancelling its plans to sell running hijabs. That's next. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, France's major sports retailer has shelved plans to sell a headscarf for female runners after a public outcry. Decathlon said it was suspending the product's launch after receiving unprecedented threats. Critics, including government officials, say the hijab goes against the country's secular values and women's rights. Debates over how Muslim women dress has stoked controversy before. In 2016, several regions introduced a ban on bikinis at beaches until it was overturned by France's highest court. Now, a spokesperson for Macron's En Marche party, Aurore Berger, took aim at Decathlon yesterday over the running gear. She tweeted, "Sport emancipates. It does not submit. My choice as a woman and a citizen will be to no longer trust a brand that breaks with our values. Those who tolerate women in public spaces only when they are hidden are not lovers of freedom." Now, Decathlon responded to Berger's tweet in the same thread, saying, quote, "On our side, we focus on democratizing the practice of sport. The fact is that some women practice running with a hijab, often not adapted for the sport. Our goal is simple, to offer a suitable sport product without judgment." All right, joining me in the studio to discuss this is Hajar El-Jahidi. She's from the advocacy coordinator. She's an advocacy coordinator from the European Forum for Muslim Women. And we also have Pierre Benazet, correspondent with Radio France Internationale, and still with us, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. All right, first, I would like to ask, maybe Pierre, I'll ask you this, the move of Decathlon. Is it right that they reacted to the public outcry? Were they right to do this?
I think it's kind of strange, actually. They seem to have only reacted in this case. We know that they are selling this product, and it sells quite well, it seems, in Morocco, and it's quite popular by women who want to run with their head covered in Morocco, in their shops there. It's available on the internet, obviously, so you could buy it. They decided to sell it worldwide, which was probably a marketing decision which was thought of before. I mean, they just didn't decide it out of the blue. So did they assess the commercial risks? I don't think they did. It's quite strange for a brand this...
So you think that as a company, it makes more business sense to have continued with the sale of this?
It would have, I think. I mean, and the market is quite huge. I mean, we know that there is the modest fashion market with 20% of the world population, which are Muslims, and we would buy these products. We have 5 to 6 million Muslims in France who would be also interested, so it would have been good business sense.
You seem to agree. You're agreeing that it makes business sense to do that. But
yeah, I mean, there's a market for it, so why not? But I think what we should really focus on when it comes to what happened, the whole controversy around the Decathlon polemic, is that why is it whenever the headscarf comes into the headlines in France, it becomes an issue? When it's in fact a non-issue. Like you mentioned, it was already being sold in Morocco. There's a lot of women who already run with the headscarf in France. So to sell a product that caters to this specific segment of the population only makes sense.
So why is there that moral outcry in France? Because we bring in the concept of secularism in France. This is a defense that is always brought forward, and it is an important value that the French a lot of French people value, isn't it?
Well, is secularism the non-visibility of religious signs in the public sphere? I don't think it is, and the law doesn't say that it is. And I think this is a very liberticide aspect to the way to look at secularism. If secularism means not being able to see the religious difference in others, that's very dangerous, and we're not in a democracy anymore. But that's the problem in France right now, is that we're trying to invisibilize the headscarf, and we're invisibilizing Muslim women who are wearing the headscarf. So it's taking us to greater issues than just Decathlon selling a headscarf.
Do you think the French government is going too far, or France is going too far in its being secular?
I constantly sit on the sofa and say, sometimes I don't understand the French psyche, and I'm going to say again tonight, I don't understand why the French are so obsessed with what people wear. And it extends from wearing Speedos and swimming trunks in swimming pools through to banning the burqa. You know, I work on the principle that the state should not tell people what they want to wear. In fact, when that quote from that MP who was suggesting that somehow women were, I don't know, submitting themselves by wearing a hijab is utterly ridiculous in the sense that they would be submitting themselves if they didn't. And all I can understand from this is, again, an anti-Muslim measure. Like, I mean, the Catholic nuns in France have for centuries covered their heads in public. No one's objected to that. And all I can judge is this is, again, another, as I say, anti-Muslim backlash, which is rather unfortunate.
Before we go to Pierre on the analysis of the French psyche, I'd like to ask you to react to what Aurore was saying. It seems like, as Darren was saying, she's suggesting that by wearing a hijab, it is women succumbing or not being free.
I mean, I think that's a symptom of the structural discrimination, the structural Islamophobia that's rooted in France and in French institutions when you have a minister coming out and saying that kind of stuff. And I think what's dangerous is the impact it has on women's day-to-day life when politics are saying these kind of rhetorics. So when a politician is saying this, it trickles down to how the population will take it and how it will have an impact on Muslim women's safety in the streets. And we've seen that. There's a similar example of in H&M, a Muslim woman that spoke to a Muslim woman wearing a headscarf and working that H&M, saying you shouldn't exist. And now we're having the state saying this product shouldn't exist. And I think it echoes what the institutions are saying.
Clearly, you disagree with that.
Isn't it extraordinary that essentially this French minister is saying that Muslim women in France are having to submit, I assume, to men by wearing a hijab, but they should actually submit to the French state instead by not having to wear it. I mean,
Pierre, maybe you can give us. Maybe you can quickly give us that. Maybe you can quickly give us just very quickly on why the French think the way they do.
You were speaking about secularism, and that's not a good word. I mean, secularism would be in any other European state where you have state neutrality, where you have also state churches, for example, like in Germany, for instance, or in many Scandinavian countries still today. We have this laïcité concept, which was born in the 18th century, was engraved in the Constitution, in the declarations, and all the texts by the civil wedding in 1792, and by the separation of states and church in 1905. And it's not secularism; it's state atheism. I mean, religion was the sign of people who were still attached to the monarchy, and it had to be rooted out. So religion is bad. And religious symbols should not exist in France because France is not secularist or neutral. France is supposed to be an atheist state. So outside of that,
So I come back to Catholic nuns.
Darren.
Why has this not been an issue before?
Oh, it has.
Okay, with Catholic nuns?
Oh, yes, but not in this, in the end of the 20th century.
But, all right, OK, I'll give you the last word because we have to go on this topic.
I think on the specific issue of why it's a problem in France, I think we do have to go back to post-colonialism and seeing that the relationship between France and the headscarf goes way back, and it's always been perceived as something that cannot be assimilated.
I mean, I think, as Darren was saying, the French society is fascinating when we look at this. There's a lot of interesting aspects there. All right, we have to leave it there. Coming up on Raw Politics, according to a new report, 7 out of 21 right-wing populist parties are climate change skeptics or deniers. That's coming up. welcome back to our politics. Unemployment fell to the lowest this century in 2018, according to a new report from the European Commission. But the situation may not be as rosy as it looks. There's also been an increase in temporary contracts. In Spain, Slovenia, Poland, Portugal, Italy, and Croatia, rates for temporary contracts are persistently above 15%, and 60% of these are young people. All right, here with me in the studio to discuss this is Italian MEP with the Socialists and Democrats group, Brando Benifei. And we have Beatrice Rios, a reporter with Euractiv. And still with us is Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. All right, let's start with this rosy figure that the Commission was presenting. I mean, yes, great that unemployment numbers are going down. But this hides, I think, a darker reality on temporary contracts. Is this being recognized enough?
Yeah, because I think also we need to look very in-depth at the big differences among the European countries and also among the regions inside the same country. We have very big differences in terms of the stability of the contracts, and it's true that the high number of temporary contracts have increased.
Are you worried about it?
Yeah, I think many young people are worried about that because it's difficult to plan any kind of family life and long-term project when you have too much of a temporary work life all the time.
Yeah, you can't get mortgages. I mean, yes, you can't plan a life when you look at that. You were looking into, like Spain, for example, has a very, very high number of temporary contracts.
It's a result of the reform of the labor market that was made by the previous government. And they even considered themselves at the time, and now the new government as well, that there is a problem because the idea was to flexibilize the labor market. But the result was that most of the people with temporary contract were actually not willing to have that contract, but it's the only thing they have been offered.
But you see, that's good. When the economy is bad, isn't it good to actually just make the market more flexible?
Well,
why not? You know, why not?
Yeah, so I think that when the labour market is changing, we have to recognise that.
Sure.
And it's not necessarily all for bad. And temporary employment is not necessarily that bad either. Sometimes it's better. People now lead far more diverse lives and having some form of flexibility.
And some would say millennials prefer it.
Yeah, well, flexibility is not a bad thing. It means that you can essentially make work around your life if you want. If you're a student, for example. That is not to say that it can thus be exploited, and there are cases where it has been. It is notable that temporary employment is mostly among the young. And again, if that means that people at least have a foothold in a job that otherwise wouldn't be there because of high unemployment rates, again, that is a good thing. The important thing is it has to then translate itself, if people want, into a more permanent job post when
which doesn't always happen. Okay,
but we should not forget that the labour market is also a matter of conflict between different interests of those who provide jobs and also those who give their energy and their competences for working. And if we have a higher number of temporary jobs, too much high in the EU, in the end, the workers will have less capability to maintain and support their rights, their opportunities. We have seen, in fact, a degrading of the workers' rights related
Brando,
to the fact
maybe it's not the government that needs to change. What about maybe banks should be more open to lending to people with temporary jobs, or landlords should be more willing to take?
For sure. I totally agree, and I'm happy that through different European funds we have tried to overcome these limits with the bankability of people. This has been at the center of many actions also at European level. But my opinion is that we should give more possibility for those who want to have a more stable work life to have it, because I've heard a lot about the issue of choice. It's true, there is choice, but sometimes there is no choice. It's they have to have that or they have no job. And this is not a way to, I think, build on quality employment.
It's not only about the length of the contracts, it's also about the conditions that Darren was mentioning before. The problem is also that the conditions of the labor market are deteriorating, so many people that actually have a job, in particularly temporary jobs, they still live in poverty. And that's an issue. So it's not exactly. So it's a poverty in work. So people that have a contract, that have a job, they are also struggling.
Yeah, the in-work poverty. So that, you know, linking to the quality of the jobs. Darren, you want to add?
It comes back to, though, this availability of choice. And as long as it is based on choice, it is a good thing. And temporary employment, by its very essence, isn't bad. And it comes back to, I suppose, kind of the dividing line that we do say in politics. We're people who embrace that type of environment in which actually being flexible with an element of insecurity is not a bad thing, and mobility is not a bad thing, compared to people who very much view those concepts as a threat. And that, I think, you're seeing a dividing line in politics. But be in no doubt, you know, people across this continent are still better off compared to 20 years ago. Employment is rising, thankfully, and people are working fewer hours. And again, overall, that is a good thing.
Okay, very quickly, I think it depends on the areas of this continent, because if we look, we have areas where we have seen, especially young people's poverty rising, and this is a failure for politics in any case. And I think that, again, not all the temporary jobs are for those who are really choosing that, because obviously...
But isn't this the important point, that actually it is in the economies that have a more open, flexible economy, where employment is higher...
the inequalities have been rising all over Europe.
But
So this flexibility was not able to really distribute opportunity and income in an even way.
Youth unemployment in Spain is over 25%. I mean, forget about inequality. I mean, that is a damning statistic. And in part, that is because Southern European economies are not as open and flexible.
I'm not convinced that you can overcome unemployment, the high numbers you mentioned, and are also in other countries, by increasing temporary jobs that can be easily substituted.
I mean, clearly, this is a fiery conversation. But moving on from the economy, there's a new report that actually looks at another issue, an important one, climate change, this as an election issue, and finds that populist parties lead when it comes to skepticism. That's in tonight's Campaign Compass. Climate change may be rising up the political agenda.
I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic.
But with 85 days to go until the European Parliament elections, it seems the climate consensus here in Brussels could be about to crumble. A new study by the Berlin-based think tank Adelphi finds that 7 of Europe's 21 right-wing populist parties are climate change skeptics or deniers. Among them, the Sweden Democrats and Germany's AfD. A further 11, including Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National, are judged to be inconsistent or keep quiet on the issue, while just 3 support the scientific consensus on climate change, one of them being Viktor Orban's Fidesz party. With right-wing populist parties predicted to make major gains in the European election, climate change looks set to become a lot more contentious here in Brussels. I mean, this is an issue that's going to be brought to the forefront and maybe used or abused in the context of the elections.
In my opinion, the problem in Spain is that politicians are not concentrating so much of those urgent issues, like it is youth unemployment, but unemployment in general. Spain is the second higher unemployment rate in the EU. But I think what I wanted to say as well is that it's not only about the conditions, it's not only about the length. The problem is as well that we don't have a social system that is adapted to these new forms of work. And this is something that has been trying to be tackled by the EU through different directives, because what we need is those temporary workers that can have a smooth transition into a more permanent contract, or to combine that with a more flexible kind of job.
All right, we'll leave it at that for now. We have a lot more coming for you on the program. Do you fear for your job security? In fact, we want to hear from you. Stick around in the next hour for your chance to call in and tell us what you think. The contact information is on your screen. You can call us at 00800 3333 7002 or email us at rawpaul@euronews.com. And join us on social media, Twitter, Facebook. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics. We're looking at that, and our lines are open now after the break. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, we have heard from the politicians, and now we want to hear from you. Here are tonight's hot topics on tonight's Your Call. Backing down. French sportswear giant Decathlon is scrapping plans to sell a sports hijab, hot on the heels of a public outcry. French politicians say it goes against France's principle of secularism. So, was Decathlon right to bow to public pressure? More than a decade on from the global financial crisis, and employment in Europe is at a record high this century. But could this be why more than 60% of young people in Spain, Italy and Portugal are on temporary contracts? We want to know, do you fear for your job security? dealing with a despot. U.S. President Donald Trump embraces North Korea's Kim Jong-un in Vietnam.
I think that your country has tremendous economic potential.
While the U.S. pushes the secretive state to open up to trade and investment, the Supreme Leader's people are living under a strict dictatorship. So we're asking, should the EU do business with North Korea? Have your say. Was Decathlon right to bow to public pressure? Do you fear for your job security? And should the EU do business with North Korea? And all of the contact information is on your screen now. You can call us for free at 00800 3333 7002. Email us at rawpoll@euronews.com. Look for us on social media. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics. And you can also look for us on Skype, because we do like to see you as well. Now, joining me to discuss this is Shona Marie, our Brussels correspondent. We also have back Pierre Benazet, who is with Radio France Internationale, and still with us, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. All right, so Darren and Shona, you will be hosting tonight's Your Call. I think one interesting panel we were having with you, Pierre, was on the hijab. I mean, so we were talking about, was it right for Decathlon to bow to public pressure, but why?
Well, was it right to bow to public pressure? I don't know, actually. This is supposed to be a marketing decision. Why did they, bow to public pressure? Have they not analysed the risk before? Some people would like to buy it. They would buy it online.
And why the reaction? Because in France, I mean, I'm sure this comes up in discussions. Like, what's the difference between walking down the street with a hijab and running and buying that
But
gear?
also the thing is, these are women who want to engage in sports and the community. And the idea that there will be an outcry over what they wear, that creates an obstacle from them. You know, and often Muslims in France are criticised for not engaging, not being part of the Republic. And here they are trying, and over something as stupid as what they're wearing, which isn't a security threat. Yeah. It's about their own interpretation of modesty. I think it's outrageous.
What about the opinions of those who are actually against it? I mean, there's...
I have to say,
they must feel that it's valid.
I literally don't understand it. I cannot comprehend why the state, why ministers feel they've got the right to tell a private company what they should sell to women and what they should be allowed to wear.
So if you have another point of view, you should call us
later.
If you're a French
person, can you please call in and explain it to me, because I do not understand.
What if you just wore a pair of leggings and a top and a hat, which looked like a hijab? Would that exclude me from wearing those same things?
This does happen, but clothes,
it runs
clothes
deep
are very
in France,
important
clearly.
in France. I mean, the first French Revolution was about pantaloons or whatever. Then we have the Gilets jaunes, which is also an article of clothing. And now we had the headscarves. And it all boils down to one thing. Is it sufficient in France? Is the way the integration was done sufficient?
Because I do want to bring up the arguments that are being brought up in the French media on this story. It is, so the defense on that is there's women's freedom, there's secularism, and there's terrorism and fear of security. I mean, these are... can you explain this to us, that it's, you know, this is the conversation that is happening in France?
I mean, we've had this polemics about the Islamic veil, they called it, ever since the early 90s. So it always comes back every 3-4 years. There are, polemics about the school administration, the burqa, are they to be banned in the streets?
Because it's not actually illegal to wear something on your head. I mean, it's not.
It's not. So you can't hide your face.
It's not illegal. I'll also come back to this point, like women's rights. Right. You know, women's right to decide what they want to wear. I mean, that should be a fundamental right.
Bearing in mind that you are in France, and there is also the fashion dictatorship, which is also
that's another topic.
No. Right. Also, there's anti-Muslim sentiment to this.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. So that's another point. So do call in. This is a topic that if you want to weigh in on this conversation, there's many ways to get in touch with us. So we'll put it back on your screen. You can call us for free at 00800 3333 7002. Email us at rawpoll@euronews.com, or look for us on social media. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics and look for us on Skype. There's just one more point. The word for headscarf is actually the same as veil in French. It's voile. So there's a bit of confusion there as well, I was reading. Interesting point. All right. Do get in touch for that. Before we go, though, we have time for Raw Moment, which comes from the British Parliament, in fact, where it seems Theresa May might be fed up explaining her Brexit plan.
If he wants to end the uncertainty and deal with the issues he raised in his response to my statement, then he should vote for a deal. Simples. Vote for a deal. Simples. Vote for a deal. Simples. Then he should vote for a deal. Simples. Ian Duncan-Smith.
Darren, can you explain Simples?
She's on fire this week, providing raw moments for us. Simples comes from an advert that features meerkats. I think I'm allowed to say it's comparethemarket.com. It's very famous in Britain, and she's obviously trying to say that...
She's just run out of words.
Yeah, precisely. It's a phrase that everyone says.
It's a colloquialism, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, there you go. There you go. Theresa May's run out of words to explain her Brexit plan. All right, thank you for joining us. See you again.